Today, I'm going to show you how to turn your AI voice agent into a complete replacement for your call center. I'm Lindsay Gonzales, and I share AI and automation solutions that save time and make money. So if you're into that, hit the like button and subscribe. Now, if you don't have an AI voice agent yet, no worries. Click the video above and watch that first. And if you do have one, you can connect it to what we're building today, which is an AI agent that sends texts and emails to leads and instantly notifies you when important calls come in. Then agents that automatically insert leads into your CRM, turning your AI voice agent into a full-fledged call center replacement. Let's dive in. Okay, the first thing that we're going to do is come to N8N and we're going to create two different workflows, one VA assistant one, so voice agent assistant one, the other voice agent assistant too. And the reason being, we need to set up the sub workflows that are going to be fed by our AI voice agent. So if you remember last week, we built this workflow, which supports the AI voice agent that we built using VAPI and Airtable. And so I'm going to show you how we can modify this ever so slightly so that it feeds into our two other voice agent assistants that complete the call center replacement. But the cool thing is you can also use this regardless of what platform that you've built your voice agent on. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to add a node right before the respond to webhook, and I'm going to execute sub workflow. Now, since I've already set up voice agent assistant 1 and 2, so this is going to feed into voice agent assistant 1, and I'm going to run it once with all items, and then I'm going to click save. Okay, so this is the entire workflow that I built for my 9 to 5. So let me just explain it quickly what we're going to be building so you kind of get a full sense of how it's going to work. So basically, when the voice agent receives a call, it's going to feed the data received from that call into this sub workflow. And what this agent is going to do, it's going to search records in our Airtable database. So this is our Airtable database, and this is where the call records are all coming in, but it's going to search each record by the record ID from Airtable. Then the agent's going to get all of the information from the call. So the caller name, the phone number, the transcript, everything that they were calling about, and it's going to categorize it based on what action is needed. So does the owner need to receive an email about it? For example, if an applicant calls, like a job applicant, and they're like, hey, I wanted to send in my application or I wanted to follow up on my interview, then he would get an email because that's not an urgent item, but he does need to know about it. If it's something super urgent, like a customer service issue, then the agent would know to escalate it and send him a text message so he gets it immediately. Same thing if it's like a service call. So like I've mentioned in previous videos, I work for an insulation company in California. And so if, something breaks or the roof is leaking or there's some kind of service related issue based on work that we did, then our production manager gets notified via SMS because that's something urgent and he needs to be able to contact the customer immediately so that he can resolve the problem. The same thing with our sales manager. So if somebody calls and they have a question about an invoice or an estimate or when their job is scheduled, that would go to our sales manager so that he can contact the customer and answer their questions. And this agent is also responsible for sending text and email confirmations when a lead books an appointment. And so the agent is savvy enough to be able to take the call transcript from the Airtable database and categorize it based on what follow-up action, if any, is needed. And then it has access to all these tools so that it's able to send emails, update records in Airtable so that the tasks that is associated with that call in Airtable is marked as handled. And then these text messages and emails are just additional tools so that it can text and email either the lead to confirm their appointment or some internal team member so that they either receive an immediate notification if it's something urgent or an email. Then it's going to search the Airtable database to see if that very record is a booked appointment, because that's going to set up a whole new workflow. And so if booked appointment equals true, then it's going to send it to the next workflow in the sequence, which brings us to this workflow. So this is going to grab the call data from the previous workflow, going to run it through a little bit of code to clean it up. And what it's doing with the code is it's normalizing the date. And so the reason for that is this agent is going to clean and parse the data, and then it's going to pass it to this agent. And this is going to create a customer in the CRM that we use for my 9 to 5, which is Housecall Pro. Obviously, I know not everybody uses Housecall Pro, and so I'm going to show you how you can set this up using any CRM, whether it's GoHighLevel, HubSpot, whatever. Okay, so the first thing that we need to do in our VA Assistant 1 sub workflow is add an executed by another workflow trigger. And so I actually copied and pasted this from my real world example because it has pinned data in there, and we're going to use that to dynamically map the remainder of the workflow. But it's set to accept all data, so nothing fancy that you need to configure there. And then you can see all this test data over here on the right. Okay, and like I mentioned, this is the Airtable database that we're going to be referring to. These are just test calls, but I'm going to drop the link for if you want to import this Airtable database into your own Airtable. And then this can kind of get you started with how the columns should be formatted and what headers you'll need to have a basic AI voice agent and call center system. So the first thing that we're going to do is add an Airtable search records node, and I'm going to choose my N8N test base over here in Airtable and map it to that. Okay, so map it to N8N test and inbound calls. Now I want to filter by just this record. So I'm only wanting to deal with that one record at a time. And so this is the formula that I'm going to use. If you want to know how to dynamically map it, I'll take this out, but it's record_ID all caps, and then open and close parentheses, space, equal sign, space, and then we're going to add quotes around this Airtable ID, which we're getting from the workflow trigger. And so this is basically telling the agent, okay, I only want you to search by this one record and see what's going on with it, handle it, and then move on to the next piece of data that's coming in through that trigger. Okay, and now we're going to add the AI agent node, and that's really the powerhouse of this thing, and it's going to be doing all of the cool work that is part of this workflow. Okay, we need to change this to define below. We're going to add a prompt, and we're also going to add a system message. Okay, so the prompt is basically telling the agent, evaluate this record and take the appropriate action per your system instructions. And we're going to get to the system instructions in just a second. But right now, we're just giving it the information it needs to make an educated action. And so we're just going to drag and drop everything over from this search Airtable records previous node. The record ID, the caller name, the transcript, the caller phone number, the caller email address, caller address, the appointment date and time. And then I have this as notes. So this is going to be something that ends up going into the CRM down the line. But that notes section that's going to go into the CRM is going to include special instructions, whether or not they're flexible on time in terms of when we can arrive for their appointment, and then the call recording. So we want to include all three of those in the notes that's going to eventually end up in the CRM. So I'm just dragging and dropping special instructions. And I actually want to remove time flexibility. I forgot that I removed that from the demo that I set up. And we'll put call recording. Okay, and I'm also going to remove referral source just because it's not relevant for the agent to do its job. Okay, next I'm going to give it its system message. So this is really the brains of your AI voice agent assistant. So I'm going to include these custom instructions down below, and these 100% work. Like this is what we use in production for our AI voice agent system at my 9 to 5. So I know for a fact that it works. But basically you'll just come in here and make updates to like your business name. If you want to add categories or, change this from message to owner to your name, so on and so forth. But this is the template that will 100% work. So basically the actions that we're going to be setting up for today's demo is message for owner, which is going to send an SMS message via Twilio to the owner, a job applicant, which is going to generate an email to the owner because that's not as urgent, a booked appointment, which is going to go into a separate workflow because that's going to end up in the CRM, and then just general questions. So general questions get answered by the AI voice agent during the call and don't require any additional action by this agent in this workflow. Okay, so now that we have the agent instructions all set, we're going to attach a chat model, and I'm going to use GPT 4.1 mini. And then I'm going to give the agent a simple memory of 10, and I'm going to define it below using the key of the phone number. And the reason for that is it'll just allow the agent to have some additional context if the person calls multiple times. All right, if you're finding this valuable so far, do me a favor, hit the like button, subscribe, and let's continue on by giving this agent some tools so that it can start contacting people. Okay. So you'll remember that we have about 4 different actions that we're going to give to this agent. It's going to be able to send an SMS to the owner. It's going to send an email to the owner, send a confirmation SMS to leads when they book an appointment, and then it's going to be able to update records in Airtable after it has done its action that it's supposed to do. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a Twilio node, and I'm just going to be using dummy data in here so that I don't have to blur it in this video, but this from number would actually be your real Twilio from number. Okay, now the to number, we're going to dynamically map from the search records previous node, so I'm just going to drag phone number over here. And then for the message, I'm going to let the model define this parameter. The reason being, in the agent instructions, we gave it an example. Like this is basically what to say. Hey name, thanks for booking an appointment. We're going to see you at such and such time and date. If you need to reach us to make any changes to your appointment, give us a call at this number. So I'm going to let it define its own message. And while we're at it with Twilio, let's go ahead and add another Twilio node. And we're going to name this send SMS to owner. And so again, I'm just going to use a dummy from number. And then I'm going to drag and drop the phone number from the previous node. And again, I get to let the model define the message that it's going to send. And that's going to be based on the call transcript that it's able to take a look at via Airtable. So it's going to let him know, hey, there was an urgent call regarding this, or somebody needed employment verification for that. Whatever the case is, the model is going to come up with that message. Okay, and then I'm going to change the name of this first node to send confirmation SMS. That way the agent knows exactly the tool name that it's looking for when it's going to send a lead, a confirmation. That way the agent knows exactly what the name of the tool is that it's going to need to send the SMS message confirmation for the booked appointment versus sending an SMS notification to the owner. Okay, next we're going to add a Gmail node, and it's going to be sending to, and it's always going to send to the same person. So we're going to rename this node email owner. So this is the email that's going to you, the owner, whenever there is like a job applicant, let's say. However it works in your business. Like this specifically for my 9 to 5 is really applicable for people who are like applying for jobs or calling to follow up on an interview, something like that. And so this to email address is always going to be the same. It's always going to be the owner's email address. And so I'm just using a dummy placeholder. But if you get other kinds of inquiries in your business that are not super urgent, that could just be an email and don't need to be an immediate text notification, then you can let the model define this parameter and just specify that in your system instructions for your agent in this workflow. But for the purposes of this demo, I'm going to just call this job applicant called. And then the message, again, I'm just going to let the model define this parameter because I gave it those explicit instructions in its system instructions. But all I'm saying is for your business, you can set this up to do a million different things. If these are non-urgent items and it can just be an email and not a text, then build that into your system instructions and just let the model define both the subject and the message. Okay, the last tool that we're going to give it is the ability to update a record in Airtable. So we're going to rename this update record in Airtable with the proper capitalization as per our system instructions so that the agent knows exactly what it is looking for. Okay, and then I'm going to map it to this Airtable database, and it's going to inbound calls. And basically what this tool is going to allow the agent to do is it's going to mark these as handled. So handled just means it has been addressed. If there's an action item to take, if there's an internal or external notification that needs to go out, that has been done. So right now, these are both marked as unhandled or just blank. And so the agent is going to pull in this specific record and then look to see if it's handled or not, and then it will handle it. Okay, so we're just dragging over the Airtable record ID. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to let the model define if it needs to make any updates to the name. I'm going to delete transcript. If it needs to update the email address, the phone number, the address, I'm going to delete referral source. I'm going to delete appointment type. I'm going to delete appointment date and time. You might think we want to keep that, but really the appointments being booked, canceled, or rescheduled all happens at the AI voice agent level and not in this workflow. So I'm going to delete that. If there are updates to special instructions, such as, my son will be home and not me, so just FYI, then I'm going to let the model update that on its own. I'm going to delete call recording, and then I'm going to let it mark handled yes or no, because again, that's defined in its system instructions. And so it has those explicit instructions that it refers to each and every time. And so it's going to know how to handle this, and I don't have to instruct it with this tool. Okay, we're getting close to the end of this one. So now we're going to add another Airtable node. So now we're out of the agent tools, and this is just a search records node. And again, we're connecting it to that same Airtable base. And what I want to do is filter with this expression. So record ID equals, and then I want to put quotes around this since it's a string. But basically what I'm doing is I'm setting up part of the workflow so that it checks to see, is this a booked appointment? Because if it is, it's going to get routed to the next workflow that we're building. Oops, and I just noticed that this has double quotes around it. So let me delete these. All right, let's test this again. Okay, cool. So now that we have that output, we can add our if node. And so this if node is going to separate out just the booked appointments. Okay, so the way I'm going to set this up is if appointment type is equal to appointment, then it's going to be true. So we only want to deal with this true branch. The false branch isn't going to connect to anything. Okay, and what we're going to do is connect this to another sub workflow, the next workflow in the sequence, which we're almost done. So I'm going to connect it to the execute sub workflow node, and then I'm going to choose VA Assistant 2. And I'm just going to save this for now, because what we're going to actually need to do is come over to our VA Assistant 2 workflow and define the data that we want to have passed through. So we're getting close to the end. If you're finding this valuable, hit the like button, hit subscribe, and let's dive into this trigger node. Okay, so we're going to select when executed by another workflow. And then what we're going to need to do is define using a JSON example. So this is an example that they provide that's default, but we have specific data that we need. And what the purpose of this next workflow is, let me go back and show you kind of the final version. This is what we actually use for my 9 to 5. But what the whole purpose of this one is to clean up the data, format it in such a way that it can be accepted by our CRM that we use, which is Housecall Pro. The same is true with whatever CRM that you want to use. You want to make sure that it's formatted in such a way that your CRM can accept it and it has all the data it needs in order to insert a new lead or a new customer into your database. Okay, and so I already know what that information is, and it's the first name, the last name, email, mobile number, lead source, notes, address, and appointment date time. And so the address one gets kind of crazy, and so does the appointment date time, but I'm going to show you how we're going to mitigate that in just a second. But the way that you can find out what all of these fields are that you need to populate, what these key value pairs are going to look like for you, is go to your CRM API documentation. So let's say you're using HubSpot. Just type in, like or just ask ChatGPT, hey, ChatGPT, I use HubSpot and I want to know, provide the API documentation for adding a new lead or a new customer or a new opportunity, however your CRM words it. But I need the API documentation so that I know the key value pairs for the data that I need in order to insert it via an N8N workflow. So just use that language and you can look up the API documentation so you know exactly what these fields need to be named in order to get that data across. Okay, so I'm going to click save. And something that I like to do whenever I have sub workflows that I'm working with is come up here to these 3 dots, go to settings, and then this workflow can be called by, and I'm just going to change it to any workflow. And the reason being, I've had issues in the past where basically it's like the workflow doesn't have permissions to receive data from another workflow. And so I'm just giving it those permissions. And I'm going to go ahead and do the same for our second workflow as well. Okay, so now that we have that JSON object in our VA Assistant workflow number 2, we're going to come back to VA Assistant 1. And what we're going to do is map the data that we need. So here it's showing this is what we're telling it we want. And so we have to map this across. And I just remembered that first name and last name need to be broken out. So what I'm going to do, because right now the first name and last name come together, but I need to split those out to enter those into my CRM. So what I'm going to do is come back here to my Airtable database, and I'm going to ask ChatGPT for 2 formulas. One that's going to parse out the first name from this first and last name combination, and one that's going to do the same for last name. And I'm going to enter those as formulas. So, okay, so give me an Airtable formula that takes name and splits it into first name and last name. And then I provided a screenshot, and I'm going to come back over to here and just add those fields in. So we're going to insert a formula. It's going to be called first name. Okay. And then I will do the same for last name. Okay, so now we have that split out. I'm going to go back over to my VA Assistant 1, and I'm just going to rerun this search records node. Okay, and then you can see down here at the bottom, the first name and last name are broken out. And so now I can rerun my if node. And then if I come back in here to my execute workflow node, I can drag and drop first name and last name and the rest of this. So email. Okay, so I can just keep dragging and dropping to map all of this over here. Okay, so now that everything is mapped, I'm going to go ahead and click save, and then I can execute this workflow, and it shows it was executed successfully. So let's go over to VA Assistant 2 workflow, and here we can see that execution. Okay, so I'm going to copy this to the editor so that we have some pinned data that we can use to map the rest of this thing. And we are nearing the end, y'all. This is a super quick workflow, so hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't, and let's finish this thing out. All right, so the first thing that we're going to do is add a code node, and basically the format that the date comes through, which is in this date time format, it's not what Housecall Pro, the CRM that we're going to be entering this data into, it's not in the correct format. And so all this code node is going to do is correct that. And so you'll see the correct format that is required when I hit execute step. But It's super easy to get it formatted correctly. Again, just look at the API documentation for the CRM that you use and ask ChatGPT, how do I get this date and time format into what I need for CRM input? So now I have my appointment date time here. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up my parsing agent. So we're going to add an AI agent node, click define below, and I'm going to give it this prompt. Basically, I'm just giving it the basic information that came through on our trigger. And then the system instructions are going to let it know exactly how I need it to format this data. So this agent is strictly responsible for formatting the data in a correct way. And in fact, we're going to connect it to a structured output parser. So it is spot on, consistent, the same every single time, because that is mandatory whenever you're sending information via API to your CRM, or inputting a new lead, asking your agent to do something the same every time. Okay, so we're just going to start dragging and dropping this stuff. So we have first name, last name, email, mobile number. The lead source is null because I didn't use one for this example. We have the notes. So that's going to end up being the notes in our CRM. So our sales manager or owner or whoever it is that's looking at that appointment, that customer, is going to be able to get a full picture of what that conversation was like, anything that they need to know prior to going to that appointment. And then address and appointment date and time. Okay, and we're going to click require specific output format, and we are going to connect it to a structured output parser. But right now, let's set up its system instructions. Okay, so I'm going to open this up so we can see it. And so these instructions are very specific, very explicit, written in Markdown, and it basically just spells out to the agent, hey, this is how the data needs to be formatted for sending to the next agent, the next step. And that agent is going to have access to the tool where it's going to input the data into our CRM. So you can take this, if you use Housecall Pro, great, it's already done for you. But what you can do is just cut and paste, like copy this, plug it into ChatGPT and say, hey, I need instructions like this, except my CRM needs it in this format. Can you rewrite these for me? And then you can absolutely use this for your own CRM. So don't feel limited just because you don't use Housecall Pro. You don't need to. Partner with ChatGPT. If you need help, like leave a comment. But this will break it down exactly how it needs to be formatted every single time. Okay, so I'm going to add a chat model, and I'm just going to leave it on GPT 4.1 mini. Okay, it doesn't need memory, and I'm going to now connect to the structured output parser here. And basically now I just need to create a JSON example that demonstrates exactly how the data needs to be formatted every single time. Okay, so I'm going to paste that in here, and I'm going to expand it so you can take a look. Basically, once again, partner with ChatGPT. Like at this point, you should have your API documentation and know, okay, if I am inputting a new customer or a new lead, how does that data need to be received by my CRM? And then take that, copy and paste it, or take a screenshot, give it to ChatGPT and say, give me a JSON example that I can use for my structured output parser in N8N. And it will whip something up like this, and you will know exactly what is needed to provide to your agent. Okay, so let's run this and see how it does. So we can see that it is formatted to perfection. And this was something that I kind of mentioned earlier in the video, but basically with the address, it was coming through as just one big blob, like one string that was 1234 Example Road, Fresno, California, 93728. Your CRM is likely going to need that split out into street address 1, street address 2, which would be like an apartment number, and then the city, the state, and the zip code all as separate fields. And so that is all this AI agent does, is strictly formatting and parsing the data into the correct format. Okay, and now we are attaching it to another AI agent. And this is the one that's going to actually enter this information into your CRM. So we're going to define our prompt below. Okay, so this is everything that we are sending to our CRM. And so we're just going to drag and drop everything over. Mobile number, lead source, which is null in this example. Then the street address, and for street line 2, which your CRM will likely require, even if there's nothing over here, you still want to drag and drop this over because that's how it's going to be mapped correctly in the instance where there is an apartment number, a suite number, something like that. Okay, then city, state, and zip. So this is what all is going to be sent over to our CRM. All right, and next we're going to add our system instructions. Okay, so this agent's sole objective is to call the Housecall Pro API. So for you, your agent, this agent's sole instructions is just to use the create new customer or create new lead or new opportunity in your CRM. That's its sole job. And so these system instructions are very specific and very basic. It's going to say you're going to receive input that looks like this. You're going to call this tool, which is called HCP create customer. You can rename it, with whatever the CRM is that you're using. And that's it. Like, it's very basic. And so now what we're going to do, I'm going to just go ahead and connect this to this chat model over here. We're going to give it access to a tool, and it's going to be an HTTP node. If you use something like HighLevel, you can actually connect it, via this tool that's built in. If you use HubSpot, there's something built in, but unfortunately there's nothing for Housecall Pro. And so that's why I'm using an HTTP node, but just be aware your CRM might actually have a native integration with N8N. Okay, so I've renamed this HCP create customer because that's the exact wording used in the system instructions for this agent. And so I want it to know exactly the tool to refer to. I'm not going to go super in depth with this node only because it's so specific to my use case. But like I said, if you use HubSpot, if you use GoHighLevel, whatever it is that you're using, you can either connect it via HTTP request, and to find out how to configure your HTTP node correctly, just grab the API documentation. If there's a curl example, you can put that into, well, let me just show you. Okay. So all I did was literally searched on Google for GoHighLevel create contact API documentation. And so if you come over here to request sample and come over here to shell and click curl, then this is going to give you something that you can actually just copy and paste into your N8N node. So if you copy it here, I'm just going to show you this as an example, but go to HTTP and then you can import it here. And then this is going to basically configure your HTTP node in the correct way. So you'll still have to add like your API key here, but everything else should be, fairly done for you. And then if there's anything down here, obviously you would need to dynamically map this. So like, for example, I can change first name. I'll move that out of the way. But I would drag over first name, drag over last name, so on and so forth. But that's how you would do it. If the quick and dirty way of figuring out how to do it is just find the API endpoint that you need, which is going to be create contact, create lead, something like that. And then that's how you would dynamically map it using the data from the previous agent. Okay, so now I'm going to run this agent. Okay, and I'm not going to go into our CRM and show you that this random lead was just created, but you can see that it was. Okay, so now the full flow looks like this. Your AI voice agent takes the call. As soon as the call ends, it sends all the data from the call into this first workflow. It creates an Airtable record, sends the information to the second workflow, and then it responds back to the webhook. This second workflow, the agent is going to determine exactly what work is needed to do. Is a message needed for the owner? Is an email needed for the owner? Does somebody who booked an appointment need to receive a confirmation text? It's going to handle its business. Then it's going to mark that business as handled in Airtable. Then if it's a booked appointment, it's going to send it to the final workflow. And that final workflow is going to format the data in a way that your CRM can handle. And then it's going to enter that data in your CRM. And that's how you turn your AI voice agent into a full-fledged call center replacement. And the cool thing is, regardless of the platform that you use to build your AI voice agent, you can still connect it to these workflows. All right, if you want to learn how to build automations like this, click the first link down in the description and join the community. Or if you want me to build something like this for you, you know where to find me. So thanks for watching. Go ahead and like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.